F1 on BBC Radio 5 Sports Extra.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Free Practice 1 for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix this weekend. Formula 1 is back after what feels like forever off since the Australian Grand Prix a few weeks ago, and it is a very, very fast street circuit on the shores of the Caspian Sea that will play host to the next round of the championship. We are now, this is the fourth race of the season, and Max Verstappen is leading the standings, 69 points for him. And Sergio Perez is second on 54 points, 45 for Fernando Alonso, who's finished third in every race so far this season. Lewis Hamilton fourth in the standings. I'm Jack Nichols. Alongside me in commentary today, we've got Rebecca Clancy, the motorsport correspondent of The Times, and we also have Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer. And it feels like we have to start with the new format for this weekend, but before that, Beck, it's been a while since Formula 1. It's been weird having this longer mid-season break. It
feels very strange, doesn't it? 4 weeks since the last race, pretty much. And given we've only had 3 races before that, it's a bit of a weird break, isn't it? Obviously, we missed a race because China was on the calendar and then it wasn't on the calendar due to the COVID situation still over there. So, yes, it's a very welcome return for Formula 1 this weekend. I think we've all missed it, haven't we?
Andrew, have you been sad and inconsolable the last 4 weeks?
I had a lovely few days in Mallorca.
In Mallorca?
I wasn't missing Formula 1 then, yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, there's a fair bit going on, Jack, to be fair, which I'm sure we'll get into in the session. You know, every few days some reasonably big story came along, some bigger than others. But yeah, I mean, competition-wise, doesn't look good this weekend. Track with massively long straights and a car that has a massive straight line speed advantage, which is also quicker than everything else around the lap. You know, night follows day, I think, probably. But plenty to look forward to with the new format and to see how that pans out.
Really selling the weekend there, Benny.
How many races are Red Bull going to win this year, Beck?
Right, so new format for this weekend. If you are unaware, because it only got announced like yesterday or quite recently, it is a sprint race weekend, but the format has changed slightly. Well, Saturday has changed slightly. Well, actually, it's all changed, so I'll just take you through it in its entirety if you're not up to speed. So we have an hour of practice now. This hour is going to be the only practice session that we have all weekend, because tomorrow morning, this afternoon, there will be qualifying for the Grand Prix. The regular qualifying, then the Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon, as sort of any other weekend, except qualifying's on the Friday instead of the Saturday. And then tomorrow becomes sprint day, basically, with a qualifying session in the morning and then a race, the sprint race, the half-hour-long sprint race in the afternoon. And then the Grand Prix on Sunday is just the Grand Prix, which is, the grid is set from qualifying today. So no more qualifying sets the grid. Is it a pole position? Is it not a pole position? The sprint sets the grid for the thing. It all makes a lot more sense, Beck, in my opinion. And it's a lot better. I'm famously, well, not famously, but like, I'm quite anti-sprint. I think it's a bit silly. But this makes it better for me. I'm happier now.
I like it. I've always quite liked the sprint. I'm a fan of anything that reduces practice time, because we've seen it in years gone by, whether it be the weather or previous sprint races we've had. Anything that reduces practice makes the race more interesting, because it's the unknown. I mean, if you ask the teams, they'd all love hours and hours and hours of practice to hone the cars to within an inch of their lives, and we'd have the same result the whole time. Red Bull winning all 23 races this year, as Andrew Benson will say. But I like it because it brings in a bit of jeopardy. Every single day of the weekend has something that matters. So this evening we have qualifying, which will set the grid for Sunday. And then, as you said, standalone on Saturday. The sprint, I get why you don't like it, because it's basically the first third of a race. So the only bit of jeopardy, the only bit of excitement is the opening lap. I understand that, but I like that they've now introduced this shorter sprint format, the qualifying format, the sprint shootout, as they're calling it. Slightly shorter Q1, 2, 3. I think it's a good idea. I know Max Verstappen has been very, very, very down on it, and he's now talking about walking away at the end of his contract at 2028. I'm sure we'll come to that as well. But I like it. I'm a big fan that reduces practice, so I'm all in for this.
Andrew, your thought? Because I think my issue with the sprint, okay, yeah, I think it was never going to produce what they wanted it to produce, even though it did kind of mix up the grid a little bit at times and whatever. But actually, if you make the sprint standalone, I have way less issue with it. For me, my biggest problem was that it was a slightly boring thing that didn't actually do what it was meant to achieve and affected the race itself.
Yeah, I mean, look, there have been some good sprints and there have been some bad sprints. The best one was Brazil 21, probably. That created an incredible story and narrative for the end of that championship. I kind of feel the same way as most of the drivers feel. I'm a bit of a traditionalist like them. I prefer, the old way of doing things. Don't really like messing with things. You want
pre-qualifying on a Thursday and then a session on the Friday.
I don't really like messing for things for showbiz purposes, because you get into if you're not careful, you get into an awkward argument about sport versus entertainment. Christian Horner quite often, well, he hasn't said it recently, but for a while he used to say all the time, Formula 1 is entertainment. No, Christian, it's not. It's sport. And it can be entertaining and it can not be, just like a football match can be a 5-4 thriller and it can be a 0-0 draw. But anyway, I'm digressing slightly. But I do also get the idea of the sprint and why they're doing it and making something count on each of the 3 days. That works for the circuits, it works for the spectators. Of course, the problem with that argument is if you follow it to its logical conclusion, every weekend will be a sprint, and I don't think that will be a good idea. So where's the happy medium? And I think they're still obviously playing around with that concept at the moment.
Cars out on track because they only have an hour of practice here. Nulla Pack says, Jack, you managed to make something really simple sound very complicated, which is true. I didn't do a great job of explaining it. For those of you syncing up, 58 minutes and 30, 29, 28, 27 seconds on the clock, and only 1 hour of practice to practice kind of for everything, because you've got you got to get your practice in for qualifying later on today. You're also going to want a bit of practice for the sprint qualifying in the morning, which has mandatory tyre choices, so you have to be on the mediums in Q1 and Q2 tomorrow morning in qualifying, so you might want to get a quick run in on that. But also you got to try and get some race running in. Also, by the way, this is Baku, where everybody was talking about bringing upgrades the whole time, so if you've got upgrades to bring, then you need to be checking those out as well, all within the next 58 minutes. It's going to be quite something to see how the teams even approach it, to be honest. We're all going to be learning at once, because Verstappen and Perez have gone out on the mediums. De Vries has gone out on the soft tyre, coming down into turns 1, now into the 90-degree left-hander of turn 2 before heading up the back straight. It's hard tyres for Sainz, Hülkenberg and Magnussen, Piastri and Norris, and then it's mediums for Bottas, the Aston Martins, Joe, Ocon and the Mercedes. So there's a lot of it's going to be a lot of frantic action in this session.
It's interesting what you were saying about the upgrades, because pretty much all the teams have bought upgrades this weekend. McLaren, big ones. Obviously, they've not had a great start to the season, didn't score in the first 2 races. 6th for Norris and 8th for Piastri in Australia, so did better. But they've brought big upgrades. Having missed their targets at the start of the year, they now seem to have the car where they want it now. But they, as you say, they've only got an hour to get that car set up as they want it. So it's pretty risky, actually, all of these teams bringing upgrades. But you mentioned it earlier, Jack. These changes to this weekend were only announced, well, they only agreed unanimously, I must say, 2 days ago. So the teams were planning to bring their upgrades long before this new format was introduced. So they would have... Oh, Russell radio. Oh, no, we can't hear it. It's just...
He says the track seems very slippery at the moment.
So it's really risky, because they would have thought they had 2 hours of practice. They don't. They now only have 1. So it'll be interesting to see how they go this weekend.
Yeah, so on the upgrades, most of them, nearly every team has an upgrade, as you say. Most of it is Baku specific, so low drag basically. So they kind of are upgrades, but they're also kind of not upgrades, like you would get at Monza. Everyone turns up with slippy rear wings, or Aston Martin, for example, have got a new rear wing and a low downforce front wing. As you point out, the McLaren one is the big one, because it's kind of put them back where they should have been in February. It's all to do with the floor edge. They admitted over the winter that they'd missed their development targets, hadn't seen an opportunity with the design of the floor edge, which is really important because it sort of controls the downforce that comes from the underfloor in a number of different ways, which I won't bore everybody with now. And it's why fundamentally James Key, the technical director, ended up losing his job. That also happened in the break, did it? Or no, it was just before Australia, that one was, yeah. So that's a key one for them. And Alpine, who are their sort of main rivals in the sort of midfield section below the top 4 now, they've also got a big car upgrade too, and Otmar Zafnauer, their team principal, was rather ambitiously saying he thinks they can close up to the tail of the sort of the three teams behind Red Bull, i.e. Ferrari, Mercedes and Aston Martin. Given that they're half a second a lap off those teams at the moment, I think Otmar's probably not going to achieve that aim. But yeah, those are the two ones to look out for, particularly to see if they've made any difference in terms of the competitive order.
So less than 55 minutes to go. Daniel Eckersley says the big question: are we still going to get a long run corner? We don't know. We actually don't know. We'll wait and see. That's TBD. That's some real jeopardy for you. Perez and Verstappen, first and second quickest. Someone's gone straight on down at turn 1, but the yellow flags are now in, and whoever it was has got back underway. Perez leading, Tsunoda second. Verstappen is now third fastest. Those two on the medium tyres. Leclerc fourth on the hards. Then we've got Ocon, Bottas, De Vries, Alonso, Zhou and Albon are the top 10. And just having a replay of, has he hit the wall here? Sainz has hit the wall on the inside just as he comes through the long left-hander at sort of turn 7, where you hug it tight to the left and then turn right, and might have got away with that, Carlos Sainz, but clipping the wall on the inside is always an unusual one, and he's left a big old mark on the wall there. Sainz, who is 8th quickest right now. Andrew, what are the other big things that we maybe need to bring people up to speed with? I guess personnel mainly up and down the grid.
Well, the main one is James Allison coming back as technical director at Mercedes after their second consecutive difficult start to the season. It's a really interesting one, the way that's been sold. First of all, they didn't announce it. It sort of came out in an interview between Toto Wolff and Jonathan Noble of Motorsport.com, and then I got a call from Mercedes a bit before that came out and got briefed on it, but no one else got a press release about it, which is a bit suspicious. And it's also slightly odd in its scenario. I mean, everyone completely understands why James Allison has been called back, because obviously they've lost their mojo, Mercedes, to say the least, since James left and became chief technical officer. But what's weird about it is that when Allison became CTO, he wasn't the boss of Mike Elliott, who was promoted to technical director. But now Mike Elliott, who you could argue has failed as technical director, has been promoted to chief technical officer, promoted in inverted commas. But he is James Allison's boss. And this all appears to have been, according to Mercedes anyway, Mike Elliott's idea. And people who know, well, you don't even need to be people who know James Allison, but he said a couple of years ago when he stepped upstairs that he felt that people had a shelf life in senior design roles in Formula One, i.e. himself, and that's why he was doing it. And now he's come back. He's explained it this week on the F1 Nation official podcast as saying that, you know, he needed the time away, and he was in a new relationship, and after his wife died a few years ago, and it would have been wrong to be on the road while he was in the beginnings of that relationship, but now it's settled down and it feels okay again. But it's all slightly confusing, I think. What did you make of it, Beck?
The best description I saw was Mike Elliott's demoted himself to Allison's superior, which is about as confusing as it gets. I think Mike Elliott had to be removed from that role. I think after Lewis Hamilton's comments to your Checkered Flag podcast saying that they hadn't listened to him, that he wasn't happy with the design, I think Elliott's departure from that position was inevitable. I think it's a very good idea to bring James Allison back in. I saw actually in your piece, Andrew, saying that he's pretty much up there with Adrian Newey, if not slightly behind. So yeah, I think they have a great person in James Allison. It makes sense to bring him back into the fold, the daily day-to-day grind of F1. He also will give Toto Wolff a bit more support, I think, because we all know Toto Wolff doesn't particularly want to be in the role. Well, certainly a few years ago, he was looking for a way out. He's lost that option with James Vowles, who's obviously gone to Williams. James Allison was a potential successor. I imagine Toto Wolff is very happy to have his good friend James Allison back in the day-to-day running of the team. I think it will make the drivers happier. I think it will make Lewis Hamilton happier, who is, we know, is quite close to James Allison and highly regards him. So I imagine there was a bit of driver influence. Would you think, Andrew, would that be fair to say?
Well, it was always slightly odd that you have someone like James Allison, of his caliber, you know, everybody in Formula One holds him in the highest regard, as a incredibly, not only an incredibly talented aerodynamicist to start with, but a brilliant leader and inspirer of a team of people who are designing a racing car. And I think, yeah, I would say, as you referenced the piece I wrote, Beck, I would say he's second only to Adrian Newey in people's estimation within Formula One. Jack, an AlphaTauri's running around without a rear tyre.
Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda's got a puncture, and whether, I'm not sure if he's hit the wall or not, or whether he's just picked that up. I would suggest possibly might have clipped a wall somewhere in order to puncture that right rear tyre, Yuki Tsunoda. Leclerc is currently quickest on a 1:45.129, 200ths clear of Verstappen, 2/10 back to Perez. Leclerc on the hard tyre as well, so that's a solid effort from him. De Vries is on a quick lap. He is still on the soft tyres. Just seeing what happened to Yuki. He is coming down into turn 3, onto the brakes, turns it into the right-hander, and the back end slides, and he goes all the way around and does tap the barrier on his way through as well. So might have
a very weird spin, wasn't it? It was almost like in slow motion.
Yeah, it took a lot of speed into the corner and has damaged the wheel, but might have got away without any suspension damage potentially, as he made his way back to the pit lane. Kind of, well, nah, I was going to go Villeneuve-Zandvoort reminiscent, but I think that's a little bit, it'll be the only time I think Tsunoda will get compared to Gilles Villeneuve, but you know, it's that sort of vibe. To be honest, it's more like, do you remember Eddie Irvine at the 1997 German Grand Prix after he had contact on the opening lap with Heinz-Harald Frentzen? It's more that sort of vibe.
I was there, but I don't remember.
So the tyre is now rubbing against the rear wing of the AlphaTauri. Changes there as well.
Yes, Franz Tost, there's not changes yet, but
No.
Franz Tost, the long-serving team principal of AlphaTauri, who actually started with the team when they were created, when Red Bull bought Minardi back in 2005. He's been there ever since. He's stepping down at the end of the year, and he's being replaced by Laurent Mekies, who's the racing director of Ferrari at the moment. Which is another interesting thing. We haven't even finished the James Allison situation, but
so we're not. We can finish that first if we want.
Well, I'll deal with AlphaTauri. Mekies, a couple of weeks ago, Fred Vasseur, the Ferrari team principal, said he was confident that Laurent Mekies would stay at Ferrari for quite some time, but he's leaving, and they haven't even negotiated his exit yet, so we don't know when he's leaving. And also at that team, Peter Bayer, who's was at the FIA, did long-term executive at the FIA, did the report into what happened in Abu Dhabi with the safety car controversy and Michael Massey, got fired by Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, about 6 months into his tenure. He's going to be the CEO of AlphaTauri, and he starts sometime later this year too, again with no specific date been made public yet.
I was surprised about Mekies, right? Were we all surprised about Mel? Not really.
No.
Not really.
No.
Oh, okay.
There's been rumours about him wanting to leave Ferrari for a while. What was interesting is these rumours were going on in Australia, and what transpired was that Mekies wanted out, and but he'd been reminded that he had a contract that said if he wanted out, he had to pay his own exit clause, which was very large, and he couldn't afford it. So I think Red Bull will be paying that exit clause for him. It's just a question of getting down to a table and negotiating that with Ferrari.
I was going to say, after Andrew said about Fred Vasseur being adamant that Laurent Mekies was going to stay, he was the only one who was, because everyone else thought Laurent Mekies would leave. He wanted the top job at Ferrari. He thought he was going to get it, so when he got overlooked for Fred Vasseur, it was inevitable that he was going to leave. And it was interesting, actually, because when it was all announced this week about Mekies taking over from Tost, Fred Vasseur actually said that he found the announcement to be quite aggressive. So he obviously hadn't been expecting it.
No, big trouble here for Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, the blue and pink machine. Well, I say big trouble. It can't. Now it's. I can't. There's a lot of smoke now. There's a big smoke and flames coming from the back of the Alpine. So that is not ideal. Not hearing the radio transmissions today, so I don't know what Gasly said. But it's certainly not good news for Pierre Gasly. Flames coming from the back of that car. He'd gone straight on down at turn 1, so I presume it's kind of gone on the long back straight. But listen to this. I mean, he's running quite slowly, so you can't really hear what's going on. But yeah, not ideal for Gasly and the Alpine. And they are, as far as the championship is concerned, Gasly has had 2 9th place finishes. Ocon has 1 8th place finish. So they haven't had a great start to the season, Alpine. But this is the it, right? It's a red flag now. There's a red flag out. So I wonder if there's been some oil left down on the circuit somewhere from Gasly's car. Just having a look out the back, I can't see any oil being spilt. So not sure what the red flag is for particularly, but that halts the session. And someone mentioned this actually a little earlier on hashtag BBC F1. I want to give them a shout out, but I might not be able to scroll back in time quickly enough. Gasly is now climbing out of his car, but a red flag in this session is bad news for everybody, because we were already talking about how they had no time to do anything, and now they've got even less time. And bad news for Alpine, because there's 2.5 hours before the qualifying session. There's another car stopped on track. So I think that's Magnussen. And where is he? Down at turn 1? Yeah, so Magnussen has come to a halt down at turn 1, sort of all by himself in the runoff area, but not near any barriers. So maybe the Magnussen car is the reason for the red flag. But Gasly has stopped by to the side of the circuit as well, on fire also. So plenty going on in this first free practice session. We're about to see what happened to Magnussen. Coming into the first corner, down through the gears, turns into the left. Oh, so the engine sort of dies. The car dies mid-corner through the 90-degree left-hander of turn 1. And there is a barbecue going on the back of Gasly's Alpine. And it's getting sprayed with fire extinguishers now, but that is a big issue for the Alpine squad.
Well, the big problem now is the car's going to be burnt to a crisp, and they've got to get it back and change the engine and fix everything in, 2.5 hours between this session and the start of qualifying. So that could be very difficult for Alpine. He might miss, there's a risk he could miss qualifying, I think, Pierre Gasly, after that.
Yeah, I think there's a big risk. Big risk he could miss qualifying. So red flag is out. Let me give you the order, because there's been so much going on over the last few weeks that we're not really spoken about what's happening on track. And obviously it's free practice, so they're all going round in a circle and setting lap times, which is why we don't need it. I think we can, if sprint happens too much, we can, it'll be the end of BBC F1 as we know it, right? If we just have to commentate properly on all of these qualifying sessions.
We're never going to just do that, Jack. The audience wouldn't let us.
No, true. Verstappen quickest, Perez second. Those two separated by 0.2 of a second, both on the medium tyre. Leclerc third, 0.7 away on the hards, with Sainz in fourth. Ocon is fifth. Sixth is Fernando Alonso. Seventh is Valtteri Bottas. Eighth is Lando Norris. Ninth, Pierre Gasly. 10th, Nick de Vries. Albon, Joe, Stroll, Hulkenberg and Magnussen, the top 15. Piastri, Sargent, Tsunoda, Russell and Hamilton, the 20 drivers. Only 4 laps on the board for Hamilton. Only 4 laps. And none of them were sort of actual lap times. Russell's 4 seconds off on his 8 laps that he's done. So the Mercedes are cracking on then with proper long running straight away. The fire is still going on Pierre Gasly's car. It is pouring out of the roll hoop, sort of the air vent above the air intake, I should say, above the driver's head. I was going to get there, Benny, don't worry. And the smoke is just pouring out of it. He's not doing qualifying. No way.
He's very happy that there's a whole new day tomorrow, isn't he? Because he's definitely not taking part for the rest of this day by the looks of it. But also to be disappointed to the listeners, we may not get long run corner, and Andrew Benson has his notepad ready to go just in case it happened.
Do you know what? I'd already abandoned long run corner because it was already looking too difficult. The Red Bulls are on mediums, the Ferraris are on hards, Alonso's 2 seconds off the pace, the Mercedes at the back, there's people going off, punctures. I just thought this is a waste of time, I'm not going to do it.
Is it just because Alonso's 2 seconds off the pace?
No, it isn't. Nor is it because he's not dating Taylor Swift.
I was going to say he's distracted by his new girlfriend.
Or is he dating Taylor Swift? We don't know, do we?
I don't know, Andrew, you tell me.
I don't know. Do you want me to email him and ask him?
I actually can't talk about Alonso and Taylor Swift. I actually can't.
Why not?
I'm here for Taylor Swift being at races, though.
You sent a message about it a few days ago when it first emerged, and you seemed to be a bit emotional, Jack. Why was that?
Because
We're all just sad for you, Andrew.
Don't bring me into this. It's
She can do better than Fernando Alonso.
Ouch. Double world champion.
That's interesting, Jack.
Come on.
Like you. Who
I'm not saying
I did say that on the message. Well, because you had a chance, I didn't get a reply.
Well, she might come
I
to
think
races
you got a better
now, Jack.
chance with Alonso than I've got with...
If you see her at a racetrack, then you can have a go.
Yeah, exactly. She did play a Grand Prix, the 2016
US Grand Prix.
US Grand Prix, yeah.
The thing is, anyway, the thing is, logically, it can't. When's he going to have met her? And how are they going to be having a relationship?
I love that you
When's he going to see her?
this. Oh, right.
You know?
Yeah.
So it can't be real, but then you just find
just
yourself
had 4
thinking...
weeks off.
Do you know what?
Yeah, but she's in the middle of her Eras tour.
How do you know that?
Because it's like one of the biggest tours in the world. Well, no, it's like a major... Like, she's on her Eras... I don't know.
Should we ask the audience, what do they think?
Yeah, no.
Is it real or not?
No, because I'm not actually... I don't really want to turn BBC F1 into a gossip column speculation. I don't think that's our vibe.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of credible evidence for it, does there, at the moment, let's be honest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
He's certainly enjoying the rumour, though.
Fair play. What an icon he is.
Has he been asked about it?
Oh, yeah, he got asked about it. He just winks, smiles and says, let's talk about racing.
He said, I'm not commenting, is what he said yesterday.
Along the realms of Charles Leclerc not commenting that he's going to Mercedes. There you go, I got it back to racing.
Do you want to get into that? We still haven't finished James Allison, but yeah, that was one of two really
finish James Allison.
Okay.
Then we'll stick with Mercedes.
Yeah, so James Allison, all I was going to say was I always thought it was a little bit odd that one of the two greatest technical minds in Formula One was employed by one of the best teams in Formula One and wasn't working on Formula One, or not at least on contemporary Formula One. He was looking at the 2026 regulations, helping the FIA write them, and as all the teams do, and he was looking at the Ineos America's Cup project, and great and everything, but when you're paying James Allison, presumably, lots and lots of money to be part of the Mercedes Formula One team, why on earth wouldn't you want him leading your design group? And now he is doing so. All is right with the world again.
Did his salary fall under the budget cap, or is he one of the top three who wouldn't fall into it?
He was one of the top three earners, yeah, for sure. Anyway, so Charles Leclerc.
He's also not. Went full similar sort of denial to Alonso and Taylor Swift.
We call it a non-denial denial in the media. So he was asked yesterday about rumours. To be fair, they've been going on for months and months. I heard it last year that Toto Wolff was looking at Charles Leclerc, as you would be, as the guy who would replace Lewis Hamilton when Lewis Hamilton ever leaves. And he was asked about it yesterday, and he said, had Toto Wolff called him, no, 0, 0, really 0, you all smile because you don't believe me, but I promise, which was and had he had conversations with Mercedes? No, there've not been any conversations, not yet, not for the moment. Now that's my emphasis, obviously, but I mean, whenever any driver says not yet or at the moment is an alarm bell phrase, isn't it, Beck, for a journalist when you hear that?
Oh, they're talking. Let's not kid ourselves. The thing about Formula One is everybody is talking to everybody all the time. When you're in the paddock, the amount of times that you see people not even pretending to hide the fact that they're walking into a rival hospitality suite, the managers, they're having conversations. This has to go on. I think it actually makes sense because I do think Lewis Hamilton will sign for another year. I think he'll stay with Mercedes. Charles Leclerc's contract is up at the end of 2024. He had a 5-year contract with Ferrari. He was very committed, but Ferrari... Every year we say this, we cannot believe that they are throwing it away again. They seem to be doing it again. He's very close. Charles Leclerc is very close to Fred Vasseur. They have a long-standing relationship. Fred was the boss when Charles was racing in the lower categories. He was the boss in Charles Leclerc's debut year at Sauber, and obviously now he's the boss again at Ferrari. So they know each other extremely well. I feel like silly season is starting extremely early, given that Leclerc's contract is even up until the end of 24, and we're talking about it in the early parts of 23. But I think it does make sense. And why would you not be looking at him? We all know Toto Wolff's first target is Max Verstappen. That is not going to happen. So he has to be sensible. He has to look at Charles Leclerc. I know a lot of people are saying that he's overrated. I think there's a fairly strong consensus within the paddock that he has the potential to be a future world champion. I think if he's given the right car, I think he will be.
Yeah, I don't know. Overrated, I don't know what we're comparing that to, but I mean, when I speak to people in the paddock, there's the debate is Charles Leclerc the fastest driver in Formula One? Full stop. That's the question. He's not as complete as Verstappen or Hamilton, but over one lap, is there anyone faster? And
I'm not sure he's as ruthless, though.
Maybe not.
And I think that comes down to that affects his racecraft.
He's also a really nice guy. I mean,
he's a super nice guy.
The quote he gave yesterday kind of betrays that. It's like he almost can't tell a lie, you know, and he's just so open and straightforward with you all the time. And if I was Toto Wolff, and there's obviously a possibility that Lewis Hamilton's going to leave eventually. Well, there's certainty he'll leave eventually. There's a possibility he'll leave at the end of this year. I don't think that'll happen. The question is, how long is the next contract that he does with Mercedes? Because I agree with you, Beck. I think he will do another contract because he keeps saying he will, and Toto Wolff keeps saying he will. But Leclerc will be the guy I wanted in that Mercedes with George Russell for the future if I was Toto Wolff. Think about that as a fantastic driver lineup.
But do you then have the threat of 2016 again? Because you have two of the best drivers on the grid, let's be honest. Yeah. George Russell is absolutely brilliant. He is outperforming Lewis Hamilton many times since he's only in his second season, out-qualified him, out-raced him last year. He's been brilliant so far this year. He doesn't seem to feel threatened at all by the 7-world champion as a teammate. He has Charles Leclerc coming in. George Russell's obviously going to want to be the number one driver. Toto Wolff is giving himself an enormous headache, but also you have to give yourself options.
Yeah, so I've had that conversation with people in the paddock too. Does Toto want Leclerc and Russell in the team because of exactly that reason? And it's a really interesting question. It's one of those things that some people would describe as a good problem to have, but in Formula One is often not a good problem to have at all when you put two people like that. The difficulty is, I think, that whereas Russell and Hamilton works as a dynamic because they're at very different stages of their career, if you put Russell and Leclerc together, you know, they're both absolutely determined, eager, exactly the same age. They've raced together all the way through the junior categories, all those famous photos that we know about of them and Alex Albon and together in karting. You could create an incredibly combustible mix. Having said that, they're both pretty sensible people, so maybe Wolff would think he could handle it. I don't know. It would certainly be fantastic to watch.
I think George can be quite ruthless when he wants to be.
I agree completely.
I don't think Charles is as ruthless, and I think let's put our money on it early. I mean, really early. My money would be on George in that one.
Yeah, well, it would boil down to who was faster, and that's the big question. How good is Leclerc in terms of absolute pace? We don't completely know yet, but you know, you can only compare across drivers, and if you compare across drivers and how they've competed through their career, he's right up there at the very top in terms of speed.
How is Leclerc rated in terms of piano?
Wasn't bad actually, that piano tune, was it?
I've actually not listened to it.
It was nice. Yeah.
It was no Mozart, was it?
No, I mean, he's not trying to be Mozart. He's just did it for a bit of fun.
Mozart wasn't strong at motor racing.
Do you know that?
I can infer
There wasn't much motor racing in the 18th century.
There weren't many motors back then.
Exactly. The first motor race was 1893, 1895? 1895, 6. Paris to Rouen.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's number 6 in the iTunes, so chart, apparently.
What
Charles
motor?
Leclerc. Charles Leclerc.
Oh, yeah. Right, 32 minutes to go now. The green light comes on at the end of the pit lane, and the session gets back underway. Anything we did the James Allison stuff, right?
Yeah, but we haven't done Max Verstappen yet.
Okay, fine.
Do you want an answer as to Gasly?
Yes.
So Gasly was forced to stop on track due to a loss of hydraulic pressure on his car, and the team will look to investigate the cause.
I love these excuses from Alpine. That's an absolute classic, that, isn't it?
Loss of hydraulic pressure. The car was on fire.
Do you know what that reminds me of? I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again.
And I know what's coming.
It's Alfa Romeo back in the 70s. Carlo Chiti, who was the famous engineer at Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo had said that the car had stopped with an oil leak. Alan Henry is bless his soul, honour his memory, legendary Formula One journalist from the 70s and 80s and 90s. He went to see Carlo Chiti after this race where the car had retired with an oil leak. Chiti said, yes, the oil's leaking out of this hole in the side of the engine.
It's a classic. Absolute classic. Right, cars back out on track. Stu G is sending me all the Taylor Swift livery cars, which I didn't know. Tony Kanaan had a Taylor Swift livery for in a race. There was some NASCAR ones as well. One one Chevy with the red, advertising the Red album, another advertising the Reputation album by the looks of things. And of course, actually, Taylor Swift, in the early days, Taylor Swift, her record label was Big Machine Records. That she was discovered there by Scott Borchetta, who is a casual, amateur racing driver himself, her former manager, and is the promoter for the Nashville IndyCar race. So that's why there are a little bit of, so maybe that's where...
But is that the manager she fell out with?
Well, yes, true.
To record all her new albums again?
Exactly. Yeah. This is BBC F1 Taylor's version.
How did you two know so much about Taylor Swift?
I'm a Swiftie. Like, I will fully sign up to being a Swiftie.
Jack's a massive, massive Taylor Swift fan.
Yeah.
You need to shake it off.
Hey! You can come back.
Don't look at me like that. It was too obvious, I'm sorry.
Exactly, that's the thing, it was too obvious. You need to be more casually cruel in the name of being honest. We've got less than 30 minutes to go, and Max Verstappen is quickest, Sergio Perez second, Leclerc third, Ocon in the pits. Hamilton out on circuit now is starting to push on the medium tyre. He's coming into the 90-degree left-hander at turn 3, a little bit of wheel spin as he then comes into the 90 right at turn 4, heading down towards 5 and 6 where the wall was clipped a little earlier on by Carlos Sainz, seemingly without too much damage. Hamilton 1.7 seconds down in the first sector alone. But as I say, hasn't done a huge amount of running in this session. As he now comes towards the castle section where the circuit narrows up. Through the left, up the hill, through the right, and then setting up for the left-hander of turn 12. Little adjustment on the way in. And then the flat-out blast down towards the penultimate corner on the circuit. 90-degree downhill left-hander. He's got a bit of traffic ahead. I think it's a Williams. Now in towards the final turn after the middle sector. Hamilton is 2.7 seconds away from Verstappen's time. And he's going to get a lovely tow here as he comes down over the start-finish straight. Oh, actually, it's his teammate, I think. It's his teammate, Russell, that's ahead of him, practicing a little bit of slipstream, potentially. 190 miles an hour, and that seems it, actually. I think that's all Hamilton's got, 190 miles an hour coming down the start-finish straight. And across the line, and Hamilton goes 15th fastest, 3.6 seconds off the pace of Max Verstappen at the moment. So, again, it's a little unclear what run plan these teams and drivers are doing, and they might have all sort of chosen different ones coming into this weekend. Stroll goes up to 4th fastest on the mediums. None of the front runners yet, only the AlphaTauris in fact have run the soft tyre so far. Nick de Vries did 7 laps on it, Tsunoda's done 4 laps on it. Hulkenberg now jumps up into 7th place, but yeah, it feels like we're seeing a real split of strategies coming into this free practice session. I'm sure eventually it'll all kind of converge and everyone will figure out what the best way to run this session is, and everyone will end up doing the same thing. But at the moment it's quite split.
Well, at the moment it's a bit like the free practice 2 of the sprint weekends last year, isn't it, where you watched it for an hour and everyone was doing race runnings on varying fuel loads. You have no idea what was going on. That's exactly what this feels like at the moment, whereas normally, excuse me, in a free practice session like this, you were pretty clear that it wasn't exactly the same, but most teams had a very similar run plan. They'd run some setup work, and then they'd do a quali simulation, and then they would do a bit of race running. That would be a normal P1 strategy, but it all seems, at the moment, it all seems to be a bit topsy-turvy.
And a reminder that qualifying is later on this afternoon. 3 hours from now will be qualifying, which will set the grid for Sunday's race. And then tomorrow is a standalone sprint day with a qualifying session in the morning and then a sprint race in the afternoon. The other thing I find interesting as Hamilton comes across the line 3 seconds off. Okay, you know, it's for the fans and the promoters and whatever. You're not actually seeing much F1 cars going around a track tomorrow because the qualifying's shortened, so that's what, 45 minutes, and then you've got a half-hour sprint race. That's it. 4 hours later, that's it for your whole day. It's not actually a huge amount of on-track F1ing. And I get that it means more and it means something, but in terms of actual...
Depends what on-track F1ing you want and who you want it for and why.
Correct.
Because I think the on-track F1 you're talking about is for hardcore enthusiasts who just want to go to Silverstone and watch cars go around all day, basically. But what Liberty are looking at with the sprint format is trying to get the wider audience, you know, the Netflix people, the new audience that Formula One's attracted in the last few years, and which we've all seen from our experiences going around the world, has made a huge difference to Formula One's audience and fan base.
Yeah, I don't disagree. 25 and a half minutes to go. Here comes Charles Leclerc. He's on personal bests in sectors 1 and 2 at the moment. He's third fastest. He is still out on the same hard tyre that he was on, and I think he might be coming into the pits here. No, he's not. He was just darting around to get a bit of a tow. Comes across the line, and he improves. Doesn't improve in the final sector, but remains half a second away from the Red Bulls, albeit on the hard tyre as opposed to the mediums for Verstappen and Perez. So moderately encouraging lap that from Ferrari, but long way to go this weekend. It's only FP1. Why do we call it FP1?
Just FP.
Should just be free practice.
Do you want an update on Alpine, whose afternoon seems to be getting worse?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like Ocon will be going back out again. They're investigating an issue with the rear of his car.
Oh, maybe they're checking the hydraulics. Less than 25 minutes to go. Felipe Drugovich in the back of the Aston Martin garage, watching Lance Stroll 5th fastest, Alonso 4th fastest. Drugovich, that's not even relevant, is he? I think he went fastest in the Formula E rookie test, didn't he, on Monday? But
you're not asking us to know what happened in the Formula E rookie test, surely.
Well, that's why I realised halfway through that it's not worth saying. 24 minutes to go. So bad news for Ocon and Gasly. Both, well, Gasly stopped on track, Ocon in the pits not heading back out. And actually haven't got anything from the Haas yet of Kevin Magnussen, because he came to a stop on circuit too. He was part of the reason for the red flag, Kevin Magnussen. And if you lose running in free practice, you are going to be right in the deep end going into qualifying. It's quite actually remarkable how often that could happen. You know, it's fairly usual, Andrew, for drivers to lose FP1, but it's fine, they got FP2 and FP3 or whatever. But if you lose FP1, you go out and install an issue on the install lap or whatever, you're going into quali completely blind.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it depends on what state you're actually in, which of course you won't really know until you get there. But generally, simulations are so good these days that the teams arrive at the tracks with the car pretty much in the right place, and they just have to fettle it a bit and tweak a bit here and there, and they're okay. It's only on those odd weekends where you turn up and it's all gone a bit wrong and the simulation hasn't worked for whatever reason that you would be in a real problem. I think the bigger difficulty is just more to do with the drivers building up to the track, and let's not forget, and that is a particular thing in Baku because it's a street circuit. You've got to build your confidence up. You can't just take it to the limit straight away. You've got to know, how far can you push it, what's the grip level like, how's the car behave when it gets close to the wall, all that kind of thing that you have on a street circuit that you don't have quite so much on a normal circuit. That's what's going to make it difficult. And actually, speaking about this particular new format, a lot of the drivers were saying yesterday that it's going to be a real shock for them, and it's completely new to get up, have breakfast, and then go straight into qualifying. You know, none of them have ever done that before in Formula One. Even Fernando Alonso, who has been around for donkey's years, to the extent that he remembers when there were 2 qualifying sessions, one on Friday and one on Saturday. Even then, there was a practice session before it, he was saying. So, that's going in cold like that's going to be really interesting.
But they don't find that an issue in the race. They don't find it an issue the first thing you drive on a Sunday is the race.
I don't. Well, I guess not. But they're the ones who brought it up, and they're the ones driving the cars, so I'm just reporting what they say.
No, I know, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but it's just, I think they're just not used to it. Of course, these are the best drivers in the world, or nearly all of them are the best drivers in the world, and they'll handle it, of course.
Well, Alonso said it was going to be difficult and challenging, but remember years ago, Lewis Hamilton was complaining that they're getting out of these cars and they're not exhausted, anyone can get in, you don't have to be particularly fit. And so isn't this just another element of adding in the fitness, the extra racing, the extra pushing? This is what we want to be seeing, isn't it? We want to be seeing it difficult and challenging for the drivers, or else what are we watching? Otherwise we're just watching practice.
Yeah. which we are. Currently, we've got less than 21 minutes to go in the first and only, one and only practice session, the Chesney Hawks of practice sessions ahead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix this weekend. Max Verstappen is quickest, Sergio Perez second fastest, 3/10 away from him, 6/10 back to Leclerc in third, fourth is Stroll, 8/10 away, fifth is De Vries, a second away, and Leclerc is off the circuit down at turn 15, and he's going to get going again, and he don't think he's hit anything. It's the corner before the Castle section where he famously crashed in qualifying a few years ago, not heeding Palmer's advice of being alert on a street circuit.
It definitely wasn't turn 15. Isn't that like turn 7 or something where he was off?
Just then?
Yeah. Turn 15 is the one onto the back straight, or the one before the back straight.
Yeah, I think you're right. It wasn't turn 15. It was the one before the Castle, so I think you're correct that it was turn 7. But Sainz comes through turn 3. The graphic said turn 15. That's why I said turn 15.
No, I know why you said it.
But I was still wrong.
Didn't know why the graphic was saying turn 15. I was as confused as you were.
I'm Jack Nichols.
It's probably a new... No. I shouldn't have said that, sorry.
No, it's fine. We're just having a replay of what happened to Leclerc. I'm presuming came in a little bit too hot, gets onto the brakes, turns into the right. Oh, big lock up on the right front, and goes straight on. Doesn't hit anything. And is he going to return to the pits on this lap? He's just coming down the start-finish straight, and yes, Leclerc returning to the pits. So 19 minutes to go. Still, only De Vries and Tsunoda that have run the soft tyre. Everybody else has run mediums, mainly mediums, and a couple have run hards. Sainz and Leclerc have run the hards. Norris has run the hards. Piastri and Magnussen have run the hards. But most drivers and teams running on the medium tyre. The qualifying today, which sets the grid for the race on Sunday, is regular qualifying, do whatever you want with the tyres. The qualifying session tomorrow morning, which sets the grid for the sprint tomorrow afternoon, is mandatory tyre choices. You have to run the mediums in Q1 and Q2, and then you have to run the softs in Q3. 18 minutes and 24 seconds on the clock. Stroll is on a push lap here in the Aston Martin. He's coming through the middle sector. Might be up on Max Verstappen's time as he comes down the hill now through the second sector split, and he's a 10th up on Verstappen through the final corner and out onto the start-finish straight once more. We saw the Mercedes topping out at about 190 miles an hour. Stroll gets over 190, 193, 194, continuing to build speed as he heads towards the line. But is he going to be quicker than Verstappen? No, he is not. And he lost 0.3 of a second to Verstappen in the final sector. And something you alluded to earlier, Andrew, was the straight line speed of the Red Bull. Nick De Vries jumps up into 5th place. So it's strong session this for Nick De Vries. Okay, he's been out on the softs, but he's now on the mediums, and he's only 0.4 away from Verstappen and a couple of tenths away from Stroll. Been a bit of a tough start to De Vries's proper Formula One career, and for AlphaTauri this season, but not too bad. Not too bad that for Nick De Vries. Have we covered everything else? Is there anything else we need to cover off story? Oh, Verstappen.
Yeah. So he was asked...
Because the reason I ask is most people are in the pits. I'm presuming to bolt on a set of softs and do a quali sim, but we'll see. So while he's in the pits, Verstappen.
Yeah, so Verstappen is for a while he's been saying he doesn't like the sprints and he doesn't like the ever-expanding calendar, and he was talking about it yesterday in his media session, and he said some really interesting things. Basically, he's asking, is Formula One actually a good life? He was very open and eloquent about it. You know, he says, yes, I like winning, I like racing, obviously the money's great, I've got a lot of freedom. But if you're doing lots of sprint race, even without doing lots of sprint races, 4 race weekends, 24, 25 a year as Formula One's heading to, he says, you have a good life, but is it actually a good life? If we keep expanding the calendar and the whole weekend is that long, at one point you question yourself, is it worth it? So he was saying he's definitely going to go to the end of his contract, which is 2028 with Red Bull, and then he'll reassess where he is. But I think what's interesting about it for me is that, well, first of all, he's so open about it, But on the other hand, this is a guy who lives for motor racing. You know, he drives his Formula One car, he goes back to the hotel in the evening, and quite often he gets on the simulator in his hotel room. He goes home, he goes sim racing. When he's not sim racing, he goes to drives a GT car somewhere like Estoril or Barcelona or Portimao or wherever.
Watches IndyCar.
And watches IndyCar, as he said yesterday, although he says he's never going to race in it. And yet, even he, who seems to have basically nothing in his life apart from motor racing, is saying Formula One might get a bit much for me, and it might do it by the time I'm not much more than 30. It's just really fascinating.
Well, he has a good home life, doesn't he? He's got his long-standing girlfriend, Kelly Piquet. He's stepped up to the role of stepdad to her daughter. He's very comfortable at home in Monaco. It is a lot. I mean, he's talking about the money, the life. I mean, we all do the same calendar without the money, unfortunately. He's on about 40 million a year.
Or without the life back for that.
Or without the life, yeah. The yachts, the cats, although I have cats. He's got
what a weird flex.
We've got to. They keep posting pictures of their cats, don't they?
I don't know. I'm not on the socials, so
Taylor Swift you can do, but Formula One not so much. The home life.
Yeah, no, I don't follow
you
Taylor.
I only do some aspects of Taylor Swift.
Okay.
Some aspects are obviously off limits.
The music. No, yeah, the music. I listen to the music.
Does she have cats?
I think she has a really.
Anyway,
I think she has a lot of cats. I think she's a cat woman. I think she's a cat woman.
Anyway, back to Max Verstappen. I could actually see him walking away.
No, you're imagining her in that outfit, aren't you?
Right, let's rein this back in. I could imagine Max Verstappen walking away at the end of 28. He'd be 31, I think, by that point.
So can he, by the sounds of it.
Well, so can he. But he does have another life. And he was talking about setting up his own racing team. He wants to do Le Mans potentially with his dad. Jos Verstappen, he obviously raced in Formula One as a racer himself. It's a tough life, this. I mean, you're never allowed to complain about working in Formula One, and we never do. We know we're very fortunate. But 23 races a year, it's only going to expand. They're never going to come back to the days of 16, 18 in the season. So we're moving up to 24. It would have been 24, as we said earlier, with China still on the calendar. It is tough, and you want to have a life. You know, if he wants to go on and have his own kids and start his own family, and, you know, people have other ambitions. And actually, Jack and I were talking about it earlier, because obviously Lewis Hamilton has a lot of interests outside of Formula One. He's got his fashion, he's got his music. But all of that seems to have kind of died away ever so slightly as this calendar expands and expands, and he's got less and less time to do it. So I do, as we mentioned, I do think he'll sign another year, but I think he will probably be feeling quite similar to Max Verstappen. Not often you can say that. And looking and thinking, actually, I have a life outside of this sport. It's just too consuming.
I don't know if it... Yeah, it was a very interesting discussion, that sort of Verstappen chat yesterday. But I don't know if it's... I don't know if it's just overkill, basically, more than like it being a bad... Because I don't think he's saying it's a bad life and doesn't like this life and whatever. So I don't think it's, oh, woe is me, I have to, spend 100 days on the road driving an F1 car. But I think it's more of that element of just you lose. And I feel it a little bit about F1. There's so many races that you come to a race and you're like, right, another F1 race this weekend, which will be pretty insignificant by the time we get to the end of the season. And this is quite fun this weekend because we've had 4 weeks off. But you do get into the sort of middle of it and be like a bit... You know what I mean? Yeah, well, we've had 4 weeks off. And so if you're a driver and it's like, right, I've got out to drive, and if you start to lose that real passion, then that's tough. And he hasn't lost his passion for motorsport, but just that it's not tough and difficult and hard, as it were. I don't think that's what he's saying, but you lose the energy for it. I don't know how to describe it. Well, it's draining. We've just had 4 weeks off, and now we've got 5 races in 6 weeks.
Yeah. So I mean, this is to sum up. This kind of sums up what he's saying. This is Verstappen again talking. Some people just love racing, and that's the only thing they know and the only thing they want to do. I'm probably a bit more in the middle. I mean, I do love racing, but I also want to do other kinds of racing. And then you can't combine the two or set up other kinds of stuff. What tends to happen with Formula One drivers, I think, is that they get, first of all, they're desperately keen to get into it. They get it, and they get into it, they love it. Then after a few years, the sort of what you're talking about, Beck, the grind of it begins to take its toll, and they start to ask, how long do I want to do this? And I think as you say, Lewis Hamilton was going through that a few years ago. He would be talking a lot around about sort of 2017, 2018 time, you know, about what he wanted to do afterwards. All that talk stopped. And I think it's because then they get to a point, or quite often they get to a point where they realise they're a long time retired. And actually, what they are what they are. They are Formula One drivers. And if you're going to race a car, this is the best possible car you can race. So quite often they get to a point, and I think this is where Hamilton is, where they think, well, actually, no, I don't want to stop. I love this. This is what I am. This is what defines me. And once I stop, I can't go back.
Right, we've got some lap times coming in. Max Verstappen is out on the soft tyre, as is Sergio Perez, as is Alex Albon. Albon comes across the line to go quickest on a 1 minute 43.628. We've got 10 minutes to go in the session, and Verstappen comes across the line to do a 43.0, half a second quicker than Alex Albon. Well, 0.6 quicker than Alex Albon. Perez is going faster still. He's up in the middle sector. He's been faster than Verstappen in sectors 1 and 2. Actually, he's 0.4 up on Verstappen, so a strong lap incoming here from Sergio Perez, probably something a bit more sort of representative compared to Verstappen's time, because it was a bit odd that Verstappen was only 0.6 quicker than Alex Albon. Here comes Perez to the line now, and he goes fastest only by 0.3 in the end, 0.4 of a second, as he gets onto the brakes into the first corner. So Perez, Verstappen, Albon, the top three. Those are the three drivers that have done a lap on the soft tyres, but we've got more laps coming in, and Leclerc's off again. This time down at turn 2, he's gone in a little deep, and presumably a sort of similar incident to what happened up at turn 7 earlier on in the session. Less than 9 minutes to go. Alonso's still in the pits. He's the only man still in the pits. Ocon, we know, had a problem. Gasly stopped on track. Kevin Magnussen lost fuel pressure, so that's why he stopped on circuit and is out of the session also. Alonso and Russell, the only other two drivers in the pits. Everybody else on the soft tyre, bar Hamilton. Hamilton's still running on the mediums with 8.5 minutes to go, so maybe opting to not do a run on the soft tyre. Leclerc came down into the... Yeah, didn't even lock up, actually, Leclerc. Just realised that he'd gone in a bit too deep and had to bail out of it, then couldn't quite spin the car around in time, so he had to do a sort of 3-point turn. Logan Sargent, we're having a replay of the American coming down to the first corner, huge lock-up on the left front, and as a result had to bail out of that lap, and maybe has cooked those softs, to be honest with you, because it was a pretty hefty lock-up coming down into the first corner. And he has now returned to the pits, Logan Sargent. So Perez quickest, Verstappen second. They're both on cool-down laps at the moment before presumably going again. Hamilton fourth, but on the medium tyre. Fifth for Stroll, De Vries, Sainz, Leclerc, Tsunoda and Piastri, the rest of the top 10. But we still haven't really had any soft lap running. They are doing something with it. They can't get the front jack under the front wing by the looks of things in the Williams of Logan Sargent. I'm not quite sure why that would be. They're kind of getting it under now, unless the car has sort of dropped down at the...
On that replay, Jack, when he locked up going into turn 1, the nose of the car looked very, very low to me, and it does almost look like something's happened at the front of the car. Maybe something's broken. That's the only explanation I can think of for both that and then struggling to get the jack under the wing.
Yeah, very, very odd. 7 minutes to go. Right, Leclerc's on a lap, so is Carlos Sainz. Sainz through sector 1, and yeah, the whole front wing was drooped down at the front, but not sort of in an obvious way. Very strange that. Yeah, the Ferrari through the first sector. Carlos Sainz about a tenth slower than Sergio Perez's best middle sector time. Verstappen's on a push lap, is improving and pretty much matches Perez in sector 1, but the fastest sector 1 comes in from Charles Leclerc, 0.4 faster than Verstappen in the first sector, Charles Leclerc. So we'll see whether he can keep that pace up around the rest of the lap. Verstappen is coming down to the final corner now. 0.2 of a second down on Sergio Perez after the middle sector. And Leclerc is losing a bit of time compared to Perez in the middle sector now. Verstappen driving towards the line, pops the DRS open, and then Cuts the timing beam. Leclerc's finding some time in the middle sector. Verstappen improves to close the gap to Perez to just under 0.2 of a second. Here comes Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. He goes third fastest, 0.3 away from Sergio Perez. Leclerc's middle sector is 0.3 slower than Perez, so he's 0.3 quicker in sector 1, 0.3 slower in sector 2. Lando Norris in the McLaren does a solid enough lap to put himself fourth fastest. Only a 10th behind the Ferrari of Sainz. Where's Leclerc going to go? Second fastest for the Ferrari, in between Perez and Verstappen. So Perez quickest, Leclerc second, a 10th between them, and then another 10th back to Max Verstappen in third. Sainz there in fourth. Norris, Albon, Hamilton, Stroll, De Vries and Tsunoda the top 10. Russell's still in the pits. Has he done? I don't think he's done a run on the softs. No, he's been out on the softs for 3 laps, but he hasn't got a lap time on the board on the softs, and is in the pit lane, so that's a bit of an odd one. But Ferrari looking strong.
They are, but I was going to say, Jack, we've got to be a little bit careful because we don't know fuel loads, but I would say for McLaren, for Lando Norris to be less than half a second off the pace of Red Bull and Ferrari at the front, that's really encouraging for them with this upgrade that they've got on the car this weekend. Their first major upgrade, trying to get them back to the place where they should have really started the season. So keep an eye on it, but that's good signs for them.
It was good from Leclerc as well, just to say quickly. His final sector wasn't particularly impressive, so to be that close to Perez looks pretty good for Ferrari as well.
4 minutes and 16 seconds on the clock. Nick De Vries in the AlphaTauri jumps up to 6th fastest.
Leclerc's mighty around here. Remember, he put that terrible Ferrari in 2020 on pole in Baku. How on earth did he do that?
He learnt very quickly from that mistake in qualifying he made, didn't he? He is very good around here.
Stroll goes 7th fastest in the Aston Martin. 4 minutes remaining in this one and only free practice session. A reminder that qualifying for the Grand Prix on Sunday is coming up later today in 3.5 hours' time. And some of you have been in touch saying that why is qualifying at a time that, that we can't watch it because we're at work? Well, it's time zones for this one. So that, I think, because at the moment in Baku it's 2:30, so the qualifying session actually gets underway sort of in the early evening, and so that'll be the case when there's a sprint. I can't even remember where the rest of the sprints are, but the qualifyings are in the evenings.
Yeah, I can't remember either. Just a point of order, what's going to be interesting, it looks like we're not going to see soft tyre runs from either Lewis Hamilton or Fernando Alonso in this session. Alonso's just gone out on an out lap, but the time screen says he's still on the medium tyre. Hamilton's still in the pits with 3 minutes to go.
And Russell as well.
And yeah, Russell too. So interesting strategy from Aston Martin and Mercedes there, if it is indeed strategy and not a problem.
Yeah, can't work it out for Mercedes. Russell's done 7 laps on his medium tyre and then 3 laps on a soft, and doesn't have a representative lap time and is sitting in the pits.
One thing to bear in mind is that tyre allocation is more restricted this weekend than normal, so it may be that they've chosen a particular tyre or particular strategy for the race, and they're running this practice session, because of that. They have to sort of think backwards from the race when they're planning tyre allocation and tyre strategy through the practice sessions, or session in this case.
Yeah, Hamilton's only used 1 set of tyres basically.
I think both drivers were in the sim earlier this week as well, so they obviously are feeling quite confident. As Andrew was saying earlier, the sims are so good. So they're obviously feeling quite confident from the work they've done there.
Perez quickest, Leclerc second, Verstappen third, Sainz fourth, 0.4 away from Perez. 5th is Norris, 6th is De Vries, 7th is Stroll, 8th is Albon, 9th is Hamilton, 10th is Tsunoda. Stroll 7th in the Aston Martin, as I say. The other Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso comes through sector 1, and he's 6/10 down on Perez after the first sector. So not a strong first sector for Alonso.
I don't think he's on a hot lap really this.
And he's on the mediums as well.
Yeah, he's on the mediums. But the other thing to bear in mind about the medium tyre as opposed to the softs and not doing a soft run is that the first 2 qualifying sessions of the sprint have to be run on the medium. So, that's something else for them to weigh in.
And George Russell is now out of the pits on a medium as well, so we'll see how he goes.
90 seconds to go. Leclerc's pushing again. Personal best in the middle sector. Almost 2/10 up on Sergio Perez's time. So we'll see how much lap time gets lost down the back straight here for Charles Leclerc, or the main straight, I should say. Because he was almost 2/10 up on Perez's time. Verstappen is starting another push lap also, with a minute on the clock. Leclerc goes quickest. a 1 minute 42.352. Didn't actually lose out to the Red Bulls in the final sector. Alonso goes 8th fastest, but got a mega toe off the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz in that final sector. Did a 24.7, so that was the best final sector of anyone, pretty much, from Fernando Alonso. Now, through the middle sector is coming Max Verstappen. He's done a 36.2 in sector 1, which is 0.3 slower than Charles Leclerc. Now he's coming into the castle section, flicks it into the left, climbs the hill. Back and looking nice and lively as he comes up through 11 and then 12. Onto the power. We'll get his middle sector split after the next slow left-hander at turn 15. Comes through that left-hand turn now, drops down the hill, neat and tidy for Verstappen, and after the middle sector, he is down on Leclerc by 500ths, sends it into the final corner at 16, and now it's the flat-out blast towards the line, neck and neck with Charles Leclerc. Checkered flag is out. Is the straight line speed here going to help the Red Bull in this only practice session ahead of qualifying later on today? Verstappen drives towards the line, opens the DRS, and pips Leclerc. Quicker by 400ths of a second. Max Verstappen will end the session quickest. Carlos Sainz is coming into the final turn now. Piastri jumps up into 11th spot. Joe goes 10th. Hamilton shuffled down to 11th. Piastri down to 12th. Sainz is having an okay lap. He's doing personal bests, but nothing particularly exciting. Don't think he'll be able to get near Sergio Perez here. He's currently 4th at the moment, Sainz, and he remains 4th, 0.3 of a second away from Perez, 0.6 away from Verstappen and his teammate Leclerc. So, checker flag out, end of the session. Max Verstappen quickest on a 1 minute 42.315. Leclerc second, 400ths further back. Perez third, Sainz fourth, Norris fifth. De Vries, Stroll, Alonso, Albon and Joe the top 10. Hamilton, Piastri, Bottas, Tsunoda and Hülkenberg the top 15. Sargent, Russell, these 17 drivers to get reasonable running in. Ocon, Gasly only getting 7 laps each. Magnussen only getting 8 laps because of reliability problems for the 3 of them. So, tight fight at the front, or it's only practice and blah blah blah?
It's only practice, blah blah blah. First to fifth is 0.8, so not particularly close.
I mean, the pattern of the season has been that Ferrari are quick in qualifying. They weren't in Australia, but that was more to do with circumstances than anything else. They kind of messed up their qualifying session in Melbourne. But the other two practices in qualifying, in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, they were pretty close to Red Bull's pace on one lap. They then went backwards like a stone, dropping through the sky in the race. But I'm not surprised to see, particularly Leclerc, up there with the Red Bulls over one lap, because, as I was saying just a couple of minutes ago, he is absolutely fantastic around this track and most street circuits for that matter. So, given their qualifying pace so far this season, it makes sense to me that he's mixing it with the Red Bulls.
Carrie says, I completely understand about time zones. We all had to get up early for Australia, but it's an increased issue for people not being able to watch when qualifying is on a Friday, which is just a bit annoying, which is a fair point. Some people are saying, why not have the Grand Prix qualifying on the Saturday so they can still watch it, and have the sprint qualifying, but I think that would be even more convoluted, to be honest. If we were going into sprint qualifying for tomorrow and then before the race you have qualify, not for me.
I think for a global sport you just have to accept sometimes it's just not going to work in your favour.
Yeah.
Or work from home.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the end of the session. The car's now just doing some practice starts. Lando Norris 5th in the McLaren will be very, very encouraging. Andrew touched on it a little earlier on, but we now just go straight into qualifying in 2.5 hours time. Make sure you join us for it. And there's a lot of unknowns. Aston Martin, okay, Alonso didn't run the soft tyre, but they don't look as strong. Andrew, were we expecting Aston Martin to still be as strong as normal here, or?
Well, there was a question mark about it because their sort of biggest weakness in the first few races has been straight line speed, too draggy. So you don't want a draggy car around Baku, so if they were going to struggle, then this would be the sort of place you might expect them to. Having said that, They have brought a lower downforce package, which they were hoping would mitigate that. I think you can't draw any conclusions from Aston Martin. Lance Stroll down in 7th. He did do a soft tyre run. 7th is about where you kind of expect Stroll to be, maybe, although Norris and De Vries ahead of him is unusual. Alonso didn't run the soft tyres. He's the guy who's been, the lead driver there, unsurprisingly, this year so far. So too early to say on Aston Martin, I think.
Well, this has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Max Verstappen ends free practice 1 fastest, the championship leader, but only half a tenth of a second ahead of Charles Leclerc. We'll be back at 1:55 UK time for qualifying for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which will get underway on Sunday, and then we have the sprint qualifying and sprint race tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining us. Looks like we're in for a fascinating qualifying fight with not much data to go off.
Thank you very much to Jack and the team. More to come from Jack and the team, obviously, today and over the weekend. Looking forward to that here on Sports Extra, but also over on 5 Live as well. Welcome to...